I'm going to start recording the session now since we're going to begin. So thank you all for first taking the assessment. We're going to be taking another 3, one for each scenario. And now we can get started with our presentation on counting and controlling, second WebEx session. And Elena, just please let me know if somebody is reaching out for us.
Yes, if you want to contact us, please address your comments to all panelists, so I will be able to read your comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Elena. So first of all, why this WebEx session? So we've been explaining this, but let's just go through it quickly. Now, there's also something I want to let you know, is that this PowerPoint that I'm going to share with you has up to 60 slides. Now, of course, we're only going to go and see maybe 20, 25 of those. What we thought was a better idea was to make this a sort of like a one-stop shop. So there are several job aids and user guides combined within this PowerPoint presentation at the end. So if you need to access movement types, you can see them in this PowerPoint. You need to access staging areas. They're here as well. T-codes, reports, job aids. So we've added a lot of information into this PowerPoint so that you can, when you're performing your physical inventory, you can just open up this presentation and see everything. Okay, I hear some other voice. So yeah, Felena, if you can find who it is and just mute them. Okay, so this session, we're having this WebEx sessions to ensure that, of course, missions are performing cycle counts, which we have realized that it's not the case, and ensure also that we achieve 100% physical counts this year. If not, we want to understand at least why, right? If it's lack of capacity, expertise, or any other technical difficulties. Okay, and we will move on to also obtain guidelines in the preparation and execution of a physical inventory count. Okay, so exactly this is what we're going to do here in this WebEx session, is to obtain at least the guidelines in the preparation of the physical count. You already had some on Tuesday. One of the first guidelines was close all open transactions. So we hope that went through. Also understand what steps to perform before clearing differences, which is also very important. We'll also see what clearing differences means for the system and how we have to do it in warehouse management and in inventory management. Understand how to clear differences in warehouse management and inventory management in order to align the stock figures in both environments. We'll also see that it can't be used in any case or in any scenario, but only in specific cases. So we'll also learn from the SMEs that are joining us. I believe, I'm not sure they're there yet under the participants list or not, but Sega Queleta should also be in this WebEx together with Kirill and Rafael Terres, as they were on Tuesday. And any of our questions or any of the questions we cannot provide an answer to, they can be jumping in and providing support to us as well. Okay, so before I even move forward with the presentation, I just want to make sure that you understand that all the information you're getting from this presentation comes directly from job aids and user guides that are available to all of you on iSeek. Okay, the one we have here, so we have the Umoja Warehouse Management User Guide, so some information comes from here. One of the ones we're going to be focusing on the most during this presentation is this one here, Physical Inventory Clearing Differences in Warehouse Management. Okay, this is the key part of our presentation. And there's also some other details from Umoja Warehouse Management in terms of the staging areas and understanding the warehouse design, and the Umoja Local Inventory Goods Movement, so you can also have some idea on the movement types and the repercussions and financial impacts. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of this. So now you know where all this information is coming from, and we can continue with our presentation here. I can still hear an echo in the background. Let me see if I can quickly find out who it is and mute them. Here it is. Yeah, I got it. All right. Okay, it was, yeah, somebody was still there in the background. All right, so let's continue. and providing the pretty much the objectives of this training. Okay, so it's clear. Provide guidelines in the execution of the physical inventory, and by the end of the training, you will be able to understand, or at least be able to perform, the key process steps for physical count and differences. These are the steps we're going to be looking at. Let me grab the highlighter here. So we're looking at the physical count, as we can see here in this part. Creating the physical inventory document, you'll have the T-codes that you need. Printing this document, always the T-codes next to them. Executing the inventory count, of course, this not performed in Umoja, but physically in the warehouse. Entering the inventory count results, the T-code that you will need to do that. And then a critical point, I believe, in this physical count of inventory is the initiating recount, right? When do we initiate the recount? Is it all the time? Is it just sometimes? When am I supposed to do it? Is it the second time around? So we're going to go over that, as it's quite important as well. And then the part of clearing differences, how to perform adjustments in warehouse management, which if you have seen that one of the job aids that I was showing before, it's actually the key part of this WebEx is performing the adjustments in warehouse management before posting or clearing differences in both warehouse management and in IM. Okay, so your last step, of course, should be to clear differences, whether it's in warehouse management or in inventory management. But of course, more than anything, last step would be to post your differences in inventory management. Okay, you're only doing that when you're clear.
Could be a temporary solution, but after we have.
Okay, I think that person was just muted. Okay. All right, so let's move on. The audience, will go through this one quickly since we saw that yesterday. Again, the roles that are expected, RD11 for Warehouse Senior User, RD10, RD02, Property Control User, and this WebEx, again, just like on Tuesday, it was aimed to these exact participants, Property Management Focal Points, Pyro Focal Points, and LPET and GDP, which I already see some familiar faces in the participants list. So we can go through that a lot quicker. All right, so first things first, what you saw with Elena on session 1, which is the planning, everything before we do the physical count. And today, what we're going to see, right? Creating the physical inventory document, who is doing each action, conduct the physical count, enter these counts, and then here, step 2. Okay, learning when the recount is, if it's applicable, when to do it, how many times to do it, and some interesting aspects about the recount, and as well as part 3. And I heard a beep, so somebody wants to speak up. So as soon as I'm finished with this slide, I'll let you intervene. And then again, performing the adjustments before we get started. All right, so let me just check and see who raised a hand. Okay. Okay, well, I heard the beep, but I guess not. All right, we will move on. Okay, we have in this presentation also the steps that are performed inside and outside Umoja. And now let's learn on what to count and how to count it, right? So first of all, what to count, even though this seems quite simple, some of the questions on Tuesday made me think that this was necessary, right? So generating the physical inventory document against the required count on a selection of bins in the warehouse. So of course you're counting what's inside the bins, and you're going bin by bin, and this is how we perform the physical inventory count, and I believe it's important to remind you of this. And how to count, because this was also something that came up on Tuesday, was the fact that once we're counting in a warehouse storage location, the bin will freeze, right? The selected bin is frozen. No movements will be allowed in the bins. Hold on, Elena, you have to mute yourself because I still hear you. Okay. Will be allowed in the bins, subject to count, and the inventory actions, goods receipt, goods issue, are still allowed during the counting. All right, so I'm going to keep going on into the gist of things here, and we're already at our steps, right? The steps we have to follow, and also some of the actions. Now, I'm not going to go into the actions step by step. For that, you have a very nice user guide called Umoja Warehouse Management, where you see step by step how to perform every action in Umoja for the physical inventory document. So let me go through this step first, which is the one performed by the warehouse senior user, RD11, where we create the inventory record for the count. Okay, so this is the first step, to create the document for the count and identify which areas in the warehouse storage type storage bin is going to be counted. All right, remember we're doing the count bin by bin, one step at a time. So the physical count process is triggered by the regular schedule of counts in the warehouse, and the process begins with the generation of the physical inventory document for a certain number of storage bins. Elena, something? Okay, thank you. And see, these are just some of the three major actions to perform. Now, I'm not going to go over them one by one, but you have them here in your PowerPoint because I wanted this document to be a one-stop shop for everything, right? The actions to perform physical count and also act as a reference document. So we have our actions, and this means actions in Umoja. So the first thing we would do, and I believe this is also something that Elena mentioned on Tuesday, is to execute the warehouse stock report to review and confirm bins for count, right? That's LX02. So that would be the first action, to first get a printout or at least a list of the bins that we're going to be counting this time around, right? Also to execute the warehouse count document and the T code to do so, and some of the let's say critical fields that we will need to complete in Umoja: the warehouse number, the storage type, and the planned count date. Again, you can find more details of this in the user guide that I showed before. Then we would create the warehouse count document, list the storage bin, the name of counter, click on activate, and get inventory number. So I'm even using verbs here on things to do, right, that I just took from that user guide. So these actions below here are directly the ones you're going to be performing in Umoja, and that's the ones that are reflected here in the screenshot. Okay, so you would list the storage bin, the name of the counter as seen here, click on activate, which is the icon here, and then you would get the inventory record number. So this, sorry if it's basic for some of you, I know for others it's not, based on some of the questions we have been receiving. We can move on to the next step. If by any chance you would like me to go back, I can do so as well. Okay, so now we're in step 2, which would be the part of printing physical inventory document. Okay, warehouse user RD10. And here we go. The physical inventory document is printed in order to record count results, of course. And once the inventory document is created and active, the inventory sheets are printed and the actual physical count is realized for those given materials. So here you have the actions, which is really the T code for this print document, which is LI04, and a little screenshot of what this document would look like once you've printed it out. So up to here, really nothing too complex. So I'll keep moving forward. Then we would enter our inventory count. Again, I'm going to just remind you of this. We're doing this, of course, after we've done all the steps that were reviewed on Tuesday in the WebEx presented by Elena, which is to complete all pending transactions. Okay, remember, if not, all these, the enter inventory count will be quite a mess if we still have open transactions once we start clearing differences in warehouse management and inventory. All right, so let's say we have already performed the count of a specific, I hear somebody else in there. Let me just make sure I can mute this person. So if you realize that you are unmuted, just please mute yourselves. If not, I'll just take some time, and here you go. Okay. All right. So the inventory count, where I was here, the action. So we're executing the count results with the T code LI11N. Again, we're adding basic information like warehouse number, inventory record, ReCount version, count date, and the name of counter. In this case, we're already adding in Umoja the actual results of our physical count of, let's say, one single bin. Okay, let's think of one single bin at a time so things are simpler. And then I would love to hear real-life scenarios from you guys, okay, and comparing what we're showing you here based on what we can actually what we're actually teaching you, right? Then we would populate in Umoja, enter the count results, the counted quantity, select 0 if the quantity is 0, which of course could be the case. And a very important note before we take a look at the chat and see if there's anything coming up. If there are differences in the system, the system will display a new screen with details and a message to notify the percentage variance. Okay, so we would click on the green tick to confirm, and the system will do this for each line item of the count difference. Check the green tick until you get to the last item of the count difference. So if there are differences in your count, and that means what differences in your count, the differences between what is in inventory management and what's in the warehouse. So what's physically there and what you actually say is there in the inventory, right, in Umoja. So if there is a difference, the system will notify you with a percentage variance, saying, listen, there's this much difference between what is in inventory and what you're telling me is actually in inventory. Okay, so here is where we get to that critical moment of, do we recount? Have we made a mistake, maybe? We also get together with the team that is counting, because I'm not sure if it just one single person would be in charge of this, of course, depending on the warehouse, the size of the things that we're counting, the amount of materials, and so on. So these are all things I would like to know from you. And then, of course, what I was saying, the result of, do we recount or not recount, right? So we would review these differences. This is a very important part here, okay? And here the role to perform this officially is the warehouse senior user, again, RD11. And in this part, the warehouse senior user will execute the count difference report and perform the corresponding analysis and reconciliation, as we were saying before. A decision is made as whether the recount is required or not. Okay, so execute count difference report is LX17. And here is the part where, of course, I would like to know if maybe, I don't know if anyone is adding that in the chat, and no one has raised their hand by now, but I think it's a good moment to stop and see before we move on to the recount portion. Okay. Okay, so I see this one was probably sent to me privately. I have a frequency of differences by bin. Okay, frequency of differences by bin. I'm not sure I understand. What the report does show you is the percentage, right, of difference. I'm not sure if this is what we're getting to with that question. Maybe we can take a look at that one after. But here, usually what we're doing, since we're counting a particular bin and particular materials in that bin, the difference that we're going to get is that one, not the frequency of difference. We're getting the difference of what we counted and what was there originally in the system in Umoja. That's what the difference is really showing us. Now, if anyone would like to bring something up, maybe a particular case where you have reached this point of reviewing differences. I know this is probably that critical point where you say, okay, now what do I do with this bin or these particular materials? Because maybe at this point, if I'm counting a bin, I'm counting the materials in the bin, and I realize that something is damaged, which it could happen. Of course, this is real life. What do I do from here? Do I continue counting? Do I do all the process steps that Elena was telling me on Tuesday, which is, of course, to dispose of this item, send it to the scrapping storage area, and then start my count again? Just pretend I'm not counting this material. So, of course, there are quite some decisions here that we would have to make before we move on and we start adding the count. So, basically, anything that was previously damaged, and Elena, correct me if I'm wrong in this case, as you were saying on Tuesday, should be disposed of before the count. Let's say I'm performing the count itself, I realize that there's a difference in here. So I would go on and move on and do the clearing of the difference, and then let that show up on my report. So I'm also going to look and see if either Sega or Rafael is here. Okay. All right, so I'm just going to give me 1 second, guys, to try to make our SMEs panelists so they can intervene. But I think this is probably maybe, let's say, imagine a scenario where this is happening. Let me just find them.
If I can, okay. We got a little bit on the question. the question, maybe Sega or Rafa can help us to answer it. It's the percentage of differences which may trigger PMU PSD action. For example, 2% or $250. Should this be applied to bin, daily count, monthly, etc.? This is a rather business question, not Umoja system-wise. I don't know if Rafa or Sega can provide any clarification on this question.
Okay, I see. You can, I see I already made Sega a panelist, so Sega, you can unmute yourself when you want, and Rafael as well. Okay, but now I understand where this question is going. We're going to get to that towards the end of the presentation. Okay, these differences, this is already once we've encountered the difference and we've cleared the difference. When should we move on to, let's say, the write-off? I think where we're getting to with this is when should the write-off occur for serialized and non-serialized materials based on this percentage difference. So we're going to get to that later on. Okay, and maybe in the meantime, Rafael and Sega can intervene if they can. I know we have some issues with audio on Tuesday. Hopefully today is not the case. But yes, we're going to cover that in one of the slides later on. All right, so let's move on since no one else is intervening with any other scenarios and questions. And we'll move on to our next slide here. Okay, so we're starting the recount. All right, so if differences are found in the count and users are not 100% sure, they should start a recount rather than to post clear differences in warehouse management. So this is, of course, one of our first, I think, critical points is, so if I do encounter a difference and I'm not 100% sure, I should recount rather than to post in clear. I have read somewhere else, and I've also been discussing this with other people, that other options are to post the differences automatically and then deal with them later. So this is something that I believe, in any case, if Rafael can either write it in the chat or Sega just to confirm it. The recount, if we're not 100% sure, should always take place, or we should always just go with the posting and clearing differences no matter what, and then deal with the problem later. Okay, so once the count is complete, clear the count irrespective of whether there are differences or not. Okay, so see this place here, so let's say there are differences. We could clear them whether they are differences or not. Only once cleared, the count will be captured for the purpose of performance reporting. So of course, this reporting will definitely be available once we have performed the clearing and inventory management. But it's interesting to know to what point should we just clear this count. When should we say, okay, we clear the count? When should we solve the issue prior to clearing the count? If there is, let's say, a scenario to follow, right? Or key steps to follow in that sense. And just let me know, Elena, if you get any feedback in the chat. Okay, and here I'm also sharing with you some of the details from the execute if applicable, the T code for the recount, the warehouse number that we would have to add, the inventory record, the things we would have to populate. So right here, I'm also adding in this PowerPoint presentation what you're doing in terms of action, populating the storage bins to recount, and what you're selecting is the option to initiate recount. All right. And pretty much this is a flow chart of what you would have to do. And here comes another question for me as well, to either the attendees or the SMEs if they can intervene at some point. So I get to the part of the recount, but I already created an inventory record. I have seen in the Umoja management, the warehouse management user guide, that a lot of the times it is requested that we delete the prior inventory record and then start from scratch. Now, is it always the case that we should delete an inventory record, or should we simply create a new one, leaving the other one just there in the system? Or is the deletion of an inventory record necessary only once we've cleared the differences? and let's say in warehouse management, and we have to start again before we clear them in inventory management. So I think, at least for me, this is a critical point where I'm starting a recount based on some differences that I have encountered. I'm not 100% sure, so I'm starting the process over again. Do I simply create a new inventory record? Do I delete the one I did before, or I leave it the way it is and just follow the steps? Print, enter inventory count, review the differences, and then, of course, I get to the point where I'm not going to just recount again because I'm in a never-ending loop. So I'm going to move on to start, let's say, clearing the differences or entering the differences in the system. If we don't have any feedback, we'll just add that to the list of questions. And maybe when we do, we can get back to them. Okay, or maybe from even some of the participants and attendees who have real-life experiences in the mission. I would definitely love to hear from some of these situations. If you have encountered them, and what have you done, and what is working out for you or not working out for you. Okay, before that, let me move on to my next slide. So here we also have the T codes for each of these actions. And we're up to the part where we're clearing differences. So this slide is going to show us how to clear the differences, but it's going to close with a question mark of when do we clear the differences. So again, based on the job aids and user guides that I was showing at the beginning of this session, you don't just simply go through this process and then clear differences automatically, okay? You should always solve some of the issues prior to clearing the differences in warehouse management. So this, even though it seems like one of the last steps, it is that critical step where you're supposed to make a decision and say, do I fix these issues or do I move on? Okay, so here we go. The discrepancy is confirmed. That much we know. So once the discrepancy is confirmed, the system quantity is adjusted, right, by a two-step clearing. And that two-step clearing is one step in warehouse management, one step in inventory management. Okay? And this is what it would look like in terms of actions. So the clearing of differences in warehouse management. The differences are firstly recorded in warehouse management to reflect actual stock in the storage bin. So what we're telling the part of the warehouse management is, listen, we said we had 10 materials or items in a bin, but actually we only have 9, right? So this is the first step. We're going to be telling the system that physically there's only 9 items, although we had 10 in the system before, okay? So at the same time, negative or positive quantities, and we'll get to that in a second, are also recorded in the interim storage area 999. So what this means is that the example I just made, we said we had 10, but now we have 9. So there is a difference of 1, a shortage of 1. Okay, but who is short on 1, me or the system? In this case, the inventory management would be of a surplus of 1 item, right? The one that we cannot count. So that's where we would come into the negative and positive quantities that are recorded. And that's where we would get the interim storage area 999 would show us that we have, in this case, an amount of -1, right? A shortage of 1, a surplus of 1 in this case, okay? So we would have something that would look like this in our interim storage area 999, okay? We have some slides for this too, so we're going to get to that in a bit, but it's good to understand what we're doing here. So our first clearing of differences in warehouse management is exactly that, telling the system what we have physically found. So I said I found 9 items. The system is going to let you know that before you had 10, so your difference is of 1. Okay, so that's what it means by clearing differences. And sorry for those of you who are already experts on this, but again, just going through the steps one by one. Executing the T code LI20. Again, here we're telling you what to populate and suggesting what to populate. And here's my little icon that says, you know what, I've cleared my warehouse management, so my job is done, right? So no, and here's where the critical part comes in. So let's say before you even clear the warehouse management or perform the clearance in warehouse management, you have to pay attention to what you're doing and say, you know what, And here's a little sentence for a reminder. Before clearing, do some cleaning, right? So at this point is when you should go back and fix any issues that you may have encountered, right? And so this is what I was talking about before, and also requesting some of the SMEs to participate and probably confirm. But in this case, before the clearing of even the warehouse management, if I have encountered issues, discuss this with the team. The idea is, the first and basic idea is, go back and fix these issues first, especially if these issues are pending transactions, right? Like Elena was saying on Tuesday, we have some putaways, we have some goods issues, we have some transfer postings. These are actions that need to be cleared, right? We have some items in scrapping, and they're there, but we've never performed the put-away, for example, right? So we also have these issues. Or we have a reservation with a goods issue, but it wasn't completely processed in the warehouse. So these are the things that we're supposed to be clearing first, before cleaning first, before we start clearing the warehouse. All right, so here's where we're going to start playing around with the scenarios, probably. But before that, anything in the chat, any other question? Okay. So I know we're almost getting to the hour. So before we take our first break, which will take some 10-minute break, and then come back, I want to show you guys the first scenario that we want to deal with, right? So let's say we reach this point, right, of adjusting incorrect differences in warehouse management, right? So we see this. As soon as inventory count is entered, the warehouse senior user executes the count difference and performs corresponding analysis and reconciliation. The result of this analysis indicates that some differences are related to issues within warehouse management. For example, as we were saying, pending transactions not recorded in the system. Okay, so these are the types of issues we're talking about. These are the types of issues that are in that user guide or job aid that I was showing to you guys at the beginning of the session. And here we learn why these issues are caused by, right? First, pending transactions not recorded. For example, what I just mentioned, picking, putting away, not recorded. Okay, or second, partial count, shortfall of material. Okay, fully or partially compensated by us in other stores, not included in count, or vice versa. So what this means is, and we'll see this in a scenario, it would be the case where we are performing a count of a bin and we say that there's a number of items in that bin, but then suddenly we realize that there were more and simply just put them in there, but of course don't do the proper transactions in Umoja. Of course, the system will always be short those new items that you have added. Okay, and while the other case, if those items were found in another bin, that bin would be in a surplus now of materials. So these are basically the two issues in the two scenarios we're going to be trying to solve together. Okay, so I'll present the scenario to you first, then I'll shoot out a quiz which will provide you with some correct answers and incorrect answers, so you select the ones that you believe are correct, and then we'll see what is the actual solution. Okay, and I also have a third scenario, and that's thanks to one of our mission LPEs that sent me one of the issues. That one is a risk that I'm taking. We're not even sure how far we can go with that one, but I've just heard a beep, so I think somebody wants to intervene. Okay.
Yes, it's me. I just wanted to ask, Ivo made a very valid comment and he thinks it's important for the rest of the participants, so I think it would be nice if he can intervene and say to the rest of the colleagues. Ivo, can I unmute you? Let me see. No, I cannot.
Does he have an icon next to his name?
Do you have a microphone? I'm trying to unmute you, but somehow is great.
Here, I'll do it. Yeah. Okay, give me 1 second. I'm not sure if Ivo, you wanted to participate orally or not, but too late, you're going to do so. So here you go. Ivo, you're unmuted now.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, you can hear me now. Okay, I'm not using headphones actually, but
Oof.
yeah, what I wanted to confirm, and I hope that it's important for everybody, usually there are several times over.
Okay, the sound is not good. Okay.
Yeah, Ivo, sorry, but we can't really understand a single word. It's all full of echo and background noise.
I can read the chat.
Yes, so if it's written in the chat, just read that out for us. Sorry, Ivo. You're muted, you're muted.
The initial question from Ivo, it was about, let me find it, the percentage of differences which may trigger PMU PSB action, 2% or 250. If this should be applied to bin, daily count, monthly, etc. As Board of Auditors was looking for count difference, it is important to have a clear and uniform response. And then, okay, Ivo got confirmation from Sega about the answer. I wanted to know, okay, it's not in the chat the answer, so maybe Sega, if you have a better sound system, you can intervene on what's Sega.
Can you hear me? Hello? Hello?
Yes, Sega, we can hear you.
This is a very good question, but it's more on policy. So we'll clarify with Carol and the MSPC, and we'll get back to you.
All right, thanks, Sega. Okay, so besides that, we didn't have any other question, right? Okay, so we'll just finish up with this slide here, and then we'll just take the break and be back in 10 minutes. So basically, what I was commenting before the question came up, thanks for participating, Ivo. Sorry for the problem with the audio. So these are the 3 scenarios we're going to be looking at once we come back from the break. Okay, our scenario 1, and again, I'm taking these scenarios just straight out of the job aids that Sega and Rafael were kind enough to guide us with and provide us with. So one of the first scenarios is a goods receipt of 50, okay, is posted in IM. Quantities are physically placed, but put away is not recorded, and differences are cleared in warehouse management. So this seems to be a very common scenario, okay? So there's a goods receipt of 50 materials posted in IM, which means that Umoja has that, is conscious of that in the sense of good receipts, so they're in Umoja, incoming. Quantities are physically placed, but the put away was never recorded. So what does that mean? That there's 50 incoming, but they're not inside of the warehouse, they're not put away. Okay, and then on top of that, we clear a difference in the warehouse saying that we have the 50. Okay, so we're going to be seeing how that issue is dealt with once we take the break. Scenario 2 that we're going to be looking at as well. Items stored in 2 bins, only 1 counted, and difference is cleared in warehouse management. Okay, so we see now another issue. Item is stored in 2 bins, but only 1 is counted, and differences are cleared. We'll see a little more on that one later. And then this last scenario that I was just adding here, since we also have the SMEs, if by any chance we did not provide the correct approach to that one, we have you here to guide us with this. But it may be something common or not, hopefully not. Cannot clear differences in inventory management because of this T code, which is the inventory management T code, and differences are cleared in warehouse management. So we clear differences in warehouse management, but somehow encounter an error when we do it in inventory management. Okay, we'll see how to solve that one as well once we come back from the break. So I believe now is the best time. 10 minutes, okay, so we'll be back at 4 and continue with the second half of this WebEx session. Scenarios. I'm just making sure the recording is back on. And here we go. So before we get started with that assessment that I'm going to send out, just like the first one I did when we first started the session, adjusting incorrect differences in warehouse management, right? So these are just basic guidelines as to what to do and at what point to do it, right? So first thing, perform all necessary adjustments in warehouse management before clearing the IM, okay? If the inventory difference is not yet cleared in warehouse management, delete the physical inventory document using transaction LI02N, perform the necessary corrections in warehouse management, and create new inventory document as if needed. So again, this is the information that is extracted from one of the job aids that we were sharing at the beginning, and this time I'm going to bring it just back up on screen. You can find the link to this job aid here, let me just make this a little bigger so I can see it, and it's on iSeek, but you can find the link to this job aid in the PowerPoint itself. So these scenarios we're looking at and the solutions provided are all taken out of this specific job aid, okay? Physical inventory, clearing differences in warehouse management. All right, so the information is directly coming from here. The link to this job aid is in this PowerPoint that we'll be sharing with you later on. So not to worry about that. And where we clearly state what to do in these specific cases, right? So we were discussing this before. Delete the physical inventory document. Now, if this is always the case, we should always delete the inventory document that we first created. If the inventory difference was not cleared in warehouse management, is that always necessary? And perform the necessary corrections and create a new document. Okay, second option is if the inventory difference was already posted in warehouse management but not in IM, the process is actually very similar. It's recommended not to post differences in IM since it will affect the stock level, of course, in IM and creating correct accounting postings, but instead of posting the difference, what we have to do is perform the necessary corrections in warehouse management, create a new physical inventory document as if needed, enter the inventory count, and clear the differences once again in warehouse management and in IM. So we're basically reaching a point where it seems like things are always going to be in that scenario. So let's say if we have an inventory difference, as we were saying before, that we encounter an issue and we have a difference, and unless it's said differently from the SMEs that are listening into this WebEx, we will always go back, delete the physical inventory document, use our transaction to start it over, and then clear the differences, right? So fix all the issues we have previous to clearing in warehouse management. If by any chance it is already cleared in warehouse management, well, no problem. What we do is not post them in IM, and what we do is do the same process again. Perform the corrections, warehouse management, create new inventory document, and so on. Okay, but we should delete the physical inventory document that we created previously. So kind of like starting from scratch every time. So as long as you're not clearing differences in inventory management, let's say you haven't, there's still a way back, okay, in a sense. Okay, I think Rafael is still there, so if at any time he intervenes, let me know, Elena. Okay. And we go into our scenario 1, which is already cleared in warehouse management. So I'm going to go through the entire scenario here, and before we provide the solution, I'm sending out that quiz or assessment, okay? So goods receipt of 50 is posted in IM, initial stock 0. Quantities are physically placed in bin A3B, put away, not recorded in warehouse management. So this is what it looks like right now. We have our goods receipt incoming. We have it here clearly with the storage type 902 of 50, okay? And we have the material, planned storage location, okay, and the storage bin. So this is a transaction that is now coming into our, let's say, inventory management. So something is incoming but not yet put away in warehouse. Physical inventory document is created for storage bin A3B, which is the one we're talking about. The physical count is 50. No difference, because remember, we put those materials in the bin, but we just didn't tell the system we did that. The system, the difference with the system at IM level, however, at bin level, the system determines a difference surplus of 50. So count 50 versus stock 0. So what are we looking at right now? Is this here, right? We have our inventory document number 7. We have it here after we've done our count. And we're saying that the quantity of items that we counted is 50 because that's exactly what is physically there. It's just not in the system. Okay, scenario continues in this next slide for a little more. So difference is cleared in warehouse management and stock A3B is increased by 50. Okay, so we've cleared difference, which means we're telling the system that now there's a difference of 50. Okay, and let's see what that difference looks like in the system. So here we have a screenshot. So remember, we have our 50 items that we said we had in our bin. We have the ones that are incoming, 902 still, that are 50 once again. And now we have another issue here, which is a difference of 50. And look, you see we have the 50 with the minus sign next to it. So again, remember, the minus sign is telling you what Umoja is short on, okay? So inventory management, or Umoja in a sense, is short on 50 materials. Okay, they weren't there before, but you're saying they're there, okay? So in our count, there is a difference here. So how do we amend this issue? All right, so I'm going to launch the assessment now, just like we did before in the polling. You're going to have several possible procedures to solve this. So select the one you believe is correct. You're going to have another 5 minutes, and I'm launching the poll now. All right, so there it is. You should have it on your screen, so please accept the poll, allow to intervene. It's only one simple question. And again, what we have is 1, 2, 3, and 4 different solutions for this one scenario. All right, I see at least 4 people in progress, and people are starting to take it now, okay? So again, this is how would you amend this issue if without even looking at the solution, okay? Let's see how many people will get that one correct. Okay, so we have another 3 minutes. Still 41 attendees have not taken this small quiz. 33 have already finished, so thank you very much. Now this may be very simple or maybe not. Based on what we have looked at in this presentation, it should be, but of course this is the whole point of this WebEx, right, is to figure out what to do, officially what to do when we have these issues. All right, so just as a reminder, remember, right, we always have to fix things in that are pending transactions before we actually move on to clearing differences in IM. We just can't just go on and clearing differences and then dealing with the problem. So basically, and according to the job aid, the process is always the same. You get to that issue and you have to solve the problem, especially if it has to do with pending transactions. All right, so 5 more seconds and we'll be done with this assessment. So thank you for those 45 of you who answered, 46 that actually answered the quiz. And I'm going to show you the correct answers just now. Okay, and we're also going to show you the answers on the screen. All right, so here we go. Okay, so now you should all be seeing the correct answer on the screen, and that's what we're going to be showing now in our PowerPoint. So basically, the correct answer was C. So we create a TO for put away. We start the physical inventory once again, creating the document, clearing the differences in warehouse management, and eventually clearing them in IM. Clear the difference in IM and the system will even out the difference, which is the first option, of course, was the wrong one. We can't go move on to IM if we know that there are pending transactions. So, of course, always clear the pending transactions before you start clearing in inventory management and even in warehouse management. Create TO for put away and clear differences in IM. Again, if we do that, we're skipping the clearing the differences in warehouse management. And we're also skipping the creating of the new physical inventory document. So C is a better answer than B. And once you perform TO for put away, IM clears the differences automatically. Well, no, because IM does not clear the differences automatically, as we have seen, and that's why we're having this session here. Okay, so now let's see quickly on the screen the actual solution for the scenario. So you're going to have this solution in 2 formats. Okay, I designed one way which is quite visual, so you can always just access this information and see the slide that visually explains how to finish the transaction, okay, the completed transaction. So the first half would be as we've shown here. We have already our MIGO transaction. This is done, and the 902 is already showing, right? So we know something is incoming. We have to perform the put away, LT06, with reference to the material document, confirm it, and then we move on to the processes in counting and controlling, which is the creating of inventory document, plus entering count, plus, of course, the final session where you clear warehouse, and you clear. See, there you go. We clear the 99 for 50, and then we clear IM, okay, inventory management. And then they even out, okay? So we have to clear when we know they're going to even out, so we don't generate incorrect accounting documents. All right, so this is the visual response to that question, and you'll also find the written response to that question, which is this slide here, so I won't go through it again. But this is also just text and screenshots, a step-by-step process of what you have to do, okay, which is basically what we have been talking about, right? Create the TO for put away. Stock is moved to the interim bin, so now we would have the 100. We still have the difference, and eventually, and finally, we have our correct count. We have the difference of minus 50 and the difference of 50, and we would be fine. Okay, so we're moving on to our second scenario. We'll take a quick look first at any questions that may have appeared in the chat, or if anyone wants to intervene before we go into the second scenario. Okay, so absolutely yes. Okay, this is always the case in our WebEx sessions. We're going to send the presentation, of course, and the link to the recorded session. Okay. You're going to have both. And on top of that, we're also going to be sending the quizzes that we are sharing throughout the WebEx. Okay, so we believe that's quite helpful. Okay. And yes, of course, remember, according to the job aid, we would delete the first physical inventory document first, and then move on and create a new one and start the process over again. Okay. So let's go with our second scenario. All right, again, as you see in the title, already cleared in warehouse management. So in both these scenarios, the warehouse management part was already cleared. Okay, and we have now this scenario. The total system stock of a material is 144. Total system stock. Now, the quantities are placed in two storage bins. Okay, we have 50 in one and 94 in another, sorry. Okay, A3B and B3B. So let's see what that looked like in a screenshot. Okay, so we have here both our bins right here. We have our count and we have our total. Okay, so up to here all looks okay. We're performing our count. Physical inventory is performed, and in storage A3B, which is our first one in the screenshot, it determines count 0. So when we actually perform the count, we realize, wow, we don't have 50, but we have 0. Okay, so there's 50 extra here. There's a difference of 50 shortfall. Inventory count is entered and cleared in warehouse management. Of course, right? Why bother looking at why 50 pieces of materials are missing? So let's see. All right, so in that case, if that's what we do, and we clear, automatically what we have here is a difference of 50, okay? Because we're telling the system that this original bin here at the top, instead of 50 product IDs, now is 0. So there's a 50, let's say, surplus in the system of items. So Umoja is over 50 pieces of material here, of blankets in this case. So 999 represents the difference, and the difference is the 50, okay, the 50 that we had here, and now we only have 94 in one of the bins. Okay, so we move on to our next slide and see what else is going wrong here. So before the posting the difference in IM, the missing items were stored in B3B. So you know what? We find these missing items, these 50 items, and we put them in the bin that had 94 originally. And the count determines now 144 in bin B3B. The resulting difference surplus compensates the shortfall in A3B. So let's see what that looks like in a screenshot. Well, let's see first if we can amend the issue. So the issue is really the fact that now we have a difference of 50 after we cleared the warehouse. Okay, a difference surplus of 50 that we have in inventory management because we said that we didn't find any of the materials in one of the bins. But originally in the system it said there were 50. So now there's a difference of 50 missing, right? So Umoja is over 50. But now we find these materials and we put them in the other bin that had 94 instead of putting them originally in the one we had, okay, with the 50. So what do we do here? How do we amend this issue? And we're going to our almost last assessment, so I'm going to shoot this assessment out now. Okay, so again, a simple question, which is this scenario and 4 answers. Okay, so those of you who are actively participating in the WebEx, this would be a good moment to test your knowledge and see if you know how to solve this particular issue. Okay, the polling is open, so you can interact with the quiz whenever you want and see how we would solve this particular issue. All right, so thank you. At least 26 people have taken the quiz, where 6 are in progress. Let's see how we can solve this issue. I think that once we have the answers to the first one, the second one should be easier. Okay, but this specific scenario has a very interesting solution and something that I may want to raise a question as well. Maybe if Rafael is still there, in the sense of how much can we just depend on clearing before we do other transactions? But we have another 2 minutes. Okay, so another 20 seconds. and this polling will be done as well. 43 have taken it. Thank you guys again. Let's see what the results are from this one. And again, we're going to be seeing the solution in the same way we saw the first one, right? First, sort of a visual solution, step by step, and then we will see the one with the screenshots extracted from the job aid. Okay, so these two scenarios we've seen so far are just taken out from the job aid that I was showing before on clearing differences. And the third scenario will be different, but we're going to get to that one in a second. Okay, so we're applying the correct answer now in the quiz. So the correct answer is D. So of course we would perform the corrections in warehouse management. And now we're going to see what that means exactly, like what sort of corrections are we performing in warehouse management. Create new inventory document in the bin with all the materials, enter count, and clear differences. Okay, so that's our best option here. All right, so I'm going to move on to the solution of this, and also seek for a clarification. If Sega, I saw you appeared again. I'm adding you as a panelist once again. I see Rafael is there. If any of you could confirm this, whether through chat or speaking up. Now, in the sense when I'm reading in the job aid, I'm reading that exactly what the polling question answer said. Perform corrections in warehouse management. Now, when I read that, in a sense, I could understand that there's some things to do in warehouse management before I move on, or do I simply clear these differences by just doing the process of creating the physical document, entering the count, and then by clearing the differences with the opposite number, we'll have our solution. And we'll see what I mean now. For example, should a bin-to-bin transaction be carried out? Let's say, because now we moved 50 materials from one bin to another. In one sense, we actually did that, right? We moved the materials from one bin to another. So when I read the job aid, let's say I'm somebody in the mission and I'm understanding that warehouse transactions have to take place. I may understand something like, oh, so I have to do some sort of transaction, like move something from bin to bin. Is that even necessary in this case? Or simply clearing the differences in warehouse management and IM suffice, okay, which means that are we simply just starting again, deleting our physical inventory document, creating a new one, and moving on and doing the performance of steps. But now this time around, what I'm going to say is that we didn't count any materials in the bin, so they can even out. So the difference could actually even out. Okay, so that's the thing. Are there any previous transactions? Like, would a bin-to-bin transaction be necessary in inventory management? Or should I simply just go into the counting and controlling portion? Okay, do I have to state what I have just done? Because the scenario itself says that we put the 50 materials in a different bin this time around. So there's actually been a movement of materials from one bin to another that hasn't been tracked. But since the job aid doesn't state that exactly, I just wanted to confirm that part. Okay, so I'm going to move on now to the other. So again, this is for all you attending. This part of the bin-to-bin part is something that I may erase from this presentation before I send it out, depending on the confirmation from Sega or Rafael, and only stick to this part. But I wanted to add it just to have this discussion now in the open. So, did you have an answer, Elena? If not, we can move on.
Well, there was a question from Dipendra.
No, an answer from either Sega or Rafael. Okay, so in this case, we can get back to you guys with the proper answer if there's actually an inventory management transaction required or not, right? So this transaction, in a sense, the job aid doesn't really specify if I have to perform a bin-to-bin transaction or not, or simply just recount. But now this time, instead of saying that there are not 50 materials in the bin, we're saying that there are 50 materials in the bin. So these two transactions should even out. Okay, so let's move on to the scenario in how it's stated in the job aid exactly. So again, perform corrections in warehouse management, create new inventory document, enter count, and post difference. So as we can see here, we would have two differences now, 50 and 50. One positive, one negative, that would even out. Okay, and actually say that the count for one of the bins is 144. Okay, so in this case, the job aid doesn't tell us that we have to do a process before that, so I may have to take that out of the PowerPoint, but I wanted to clarify that today if the SMEs were able to intervene. Okay, and we can move on to our third scenario, and this is a scenario that I added that is not in the job aid to see if we could solve it together or if the solution is quite easy, because not all of you have the issues that someone else has in the mission. Everyone has their own world and their own issues in the mission here. So one of the LPs that used to come to trainings with us had a transaction in the mission that says that, listen, I've cleared the warehouse management portion, but I can't clear the inventory management portion because I get an error from the system. And this is the scenario that I decided to add here with a possible solution. Okay, I also took out the warehouse number, so we can't really guess where this is coming from. But in this case, we're clearing the differences type 999, which means that something has already been cleared in warehouse management because these are already differences. We can see by the minus sign next to 173 and the 2. But when I am trying to clear them in inventory management, I get the following error displayed. Okay, so we have this error. Change the inspection stock of material in quality management only. Okay, so eventually not being able to move on from this point. Now, if I realize, looking at the screenshot, okay, and this is the basic understanding if you're all with me at this point here, we have something quite interesting here with these materials, which is this nice Q, right? Which, if I'm not mistaken, still means that these items should be under quality. So in a sense, if we are performing a physical count of materials that have a stock status of quality, we shouldn't be performing this physical count of these materials, or these materials should already have gone from quality to unrestricted, right? They shouldn't have stayed there that long that we're performing a count of something that still has status quality. So in a sense, if we even want to add these into the accounting and clearing the differences, we should first change their status and then move on to the inventory count. The fact that these are still under stock type Q quality is what is generating this following error message as far as I can see. Okay, we can all decide to provide an answer to this one. So we have one last assessment or polling for this one. So how do we amend this issue? And I'm going to share it with you guys. Okay, it's shared now. And see what would be, in a sense, what we would recommend our colleague to do in this case, based on the scenario you see on screen. All right, and this would be the last scenario that we're going to cover today. And we'll leave the last 15 minutes or so to go over some questions. Okay, so now this assessment is focused on this specific scenario that is not in the job aid I was showing before. This has come to me through an email from a colleague that is asking for help, and I said, you know what, let me just add this one to the WebEx session. Okay, so one more minute and a half, and this will be our last quiz. Thanks for participating. I see at least 40 people have answered this quiz too. And we'll see what answers we've come up together. Now again, this scenario is not extracted from the job aid. This is a scenario brought up to me by a colleague. And the solution is one we're going to be seeing together. If you had had this case in the mission, I'm going to see what type of answers we've received. All right, so the assessment is over. I also received a question in the chat in the meantime that says, can physical count be done for a particular product ID instead of a bin? Okay, well, I mean, what you're doing is you're setting a bin aside, and let's say very generically, you're freezing a bin to count what's in that bin particularly, not just that one product ID. But you can count the product, the material, or the specific material in that bin, yes. But of course, you're counting it as a whole thing, right? So there's one bin that is completely, let's say, blocked or frozen so that you can count the materials in that bin. If you have several materials in that bin, it's a different story, but it's not done, the physical inventory count is not done just to count one particular product ID. It's done to count what you have inside your bins in the warehouse. Okay, so we have the answers. So I'm showing you the correct answers and the results. Let's see what we can get here and see what the majority of you have answered. At least 47 of you have. So in a sense, I'm saying here B and C are correct. And now here's where I would definitely like somebody to interact and bring up, this issue may have occurred, it's probably occurring or not. So in a sense, should materials under quality inspection even be part of this physical inventory count or not, right? And if they're supposed to be, but now they're still under quality, their status, stock status, should be changed from quality to unrestricted, or if there's a problem with them, to return to the vendor. Something should be done with the status of this stock. We can't just leave the status like this because we see that the system is returning an error. Okay, so practically again the solution in this case, as we're seeing here, so if let's say we wanted to perform the count and avoid this this issue with the stock status, we would definitely have to change the quality to unrestricted. Okay, we saw that with Elena on Tuesday as well. And we would have to do that under inventory again. Remember, this is the visual response. So again, movement type 321 just to change the status, right? So posting change area 922 now from quality to unrestricted. Okay, Q to U. And of course, in warehouse, if we have to perform the put away now that we have the posting change, we would have an open transaction. So remember, as we said on Tuesday, we have to close these open transactions and confirm this transaction too. And then again, we just have to, again, complete the process of counting and controlling, right? Create the document, new inventory document, enter count, and again, clear the differences in both warehouse and inventory. Okay, let's say in a sense that if the mistake is not that we're counting the wrong product IDs, but that we actually are counting the right ones, but it turns out that they're still under the quality status, something should be done about this stock status before the count is performed, or cleared in a sense. All right, so we've reached the end of the WebEx session in the sense of scenarios. We're going to go through now the clearing differences in IM and some of the major statements, right, that are also extracted from the job aids and the user guides before we close the session completely, okay? So what happens if the difference is cleared also in inventory management, right? We saw that in this case, we were only clearing up to warehouse management. But what happens if also cleared in inventory management? Well, this step will generate an accounting document, okay? Differences in the interim storage area are posted into IM and they match the ones in warehouse management. You have your actions, T-codes, and actions to perform. And very importantly, two aspects that are very important now here is one, if there are materials to be written off, the system displays the warehouse physical count differences that are still to be cleared. If there are no materials to be written off, the step is not required. Okay, so in the sense, once we perform this transaction and there are materials to be written off, the system will display another transaction to perform. If not, it won't. Okay. Once again, and still with clearing differences, this is what a screenshot would look like of that screen we were talking about in the slide before. Select the checkboxes of the left slide in the line that display the differences that are to be written off. So if we want to perform write-off of some of these differences, according to the job aid, what we would do is select those items, as we see in this checkbox, that we want to also perform a write-off for. Each, in this case, all of them are selected, and all these items will be written off. Okay, in this system, we see that we also have the negative amounts and the ones without the sign, which would be the positive amounts, and the storage bin, which is for scrap and other bins. We also have an explanation at the bottom of the quantity, again with a negative sign. So what we were explaining before means that the stock counted is more than the quantity in the system. Okay, so negative sign always means Umoja is short. Your inventory management is short on that amount that you have counted. And if it has no sign, which could also be a positive sign, it means that the stock that you counted is less than the quantity in the system, which means that Umoja is over. Okay, so that's a way to understand it. And now, the last few slides, oh, I went through that one a bit too quick. If count included serialized materials, okay, so this is quite important here. If count included serialized materials, and we're still talking about clearing differences in IM. Now, any count difference for serialized equipment must be followed by a write-off process in compliance with the threshold and approval limits of the delegation of authority for property management. Okay, so this is strictly by the book. I believe this is some of the questions we were having before in the chat that were kind of like skipping ahead of the WebEx session as to when to proceed to write off. In this case, this is for serialized equipment. So again, it has to be in compliance with the threshold and approval limits of the delegation of authority of property management. So I guess it's really not something, the decision is not directly based on what you think you should do. And then if the count includes non-serialized materials for which there are differences, and here's where we're talking about that percentage difference or value difference before from Ibor. Count differences for non-serialized items should be cleared by the RD02, which is the property control user, in line with the limits established by the Central Warehouse Operating Manual, which is the one Ibor was stating before, $250 or 2%, whichever is lower. Okay, I know this is much more of a business theme and something to discuss. I'm really not the person if you want to know more about this. This is what the job aid states. I've just limited myself to state it in this presentation. Any differences that exceed the limits, okay, that exceed the limits that we were talking about here, should be followed by the initiation of a write-off case in line with the DOA for property management. Okay, so again, remember, you're going to get this PowerPoint at the end of the session. And briefly, the last slide here, which goes over visually what we were just looking at before, understanding how we're clearing differences in warehouse management. So in one of our scenarios where we cleared the difference, saying first we were missing 50 and then we found the 50, so that clears to 0 in warehouse management. And then in inventory management, there's no difference in inventory management. Okay. Another case, if we're clearing and we're saying 50 in no negative sign, what we're really saying is plus 50, which means there's a surplus of 50 in inventory management. Okay, this is just for easy understanding of what we've been discussing before. And again, if now the warehouse management clearing is minus 50, what we're saying in the system in IM is that there's a shortage of 50. All right, and again, to our right, the write-off. When to write off, when not to write off. Again, we're going to see this a bit more visually now. Yes and no for serialized items. So, must comply with threshold and approval limits of delegation of authority of property management. And for our second scenario, which was non-serialized, yes and when no for write-off. The yes is when it's above established limits in Central Warehouse Operating Manual, and no below established limits in Central Warehouse Operating Manual. So basically this is a visual of the slide before, the couple of slides we were looking at before. And that brings us to the end of this presentation. The last slide here is really to execute your LX22 to see the inventory records. So this is more of a report once you're done with the physical inventory count, okay, and what it would look like. Okay, we have, again, as I said before, all the job aids and user guides this presentation is based on, with a link directly to each one of them in iSeek. We've also added all the T-codes and transactions that are very useful in terms of performing either the clearing, the physical count, or the transactions that are pending. And you will also find a number of other slides. So again, remember, I have added slides from the movement types from other, and I'm just going through this one quickly so you guys can see the movement types, their financial implication, the ones that are statistical, the ones that are real for each scenario. Okay, meaning if it's a status change in stock, what are the movement types? If it's a transfer posting for one step. Again, this is just extracted from other job aids and other user guides, but I just tried to put them all together in this one PowerPoint so you guys would have a one-stop shop for everything. Okay, and the same for the warehouse to explain the warehouse storage type and the storage types, sections, and interim storage locations. Okay, and that's the end of this presentation. All right, so I can go back to my first slide and see if there's anyone who wants to come back. Are there any questions, or no one has raised their hand during the WebEx? Thank you guys for taking the assessments. I hope this was useful. Before we send the presentation, maybe we need a couple of confirmations from Sega and Rafael after this WebEx. So if the presentation is not sent immediately after the WebEx, don't worry, it will be sent tomorrow. We still have, today's Thursday, so tomorrow's Friday, we still have a day to do so. But before it's sent, I just want to ensure a couple of things with the SMEs and HQ before this presentation is shared, so you have all the correct information. All right, so I can close and stop recording them. And we actually said that there's a surplus of them. Then, and this is something also, if Rafael is still around and can add it, for the system to keep, if we already cleared a difference in warehouse management of 50, and I don't delete the inventory document, and I perform a new count, and now I say I do have a surplus of 50, do those two differences counter each other out, or does the inventory document always have to be deleted and started from scratch? Okay, because in the second scenario, there's a feeling that we don't have to delete the inventory document. So this is where I think I at least need a little clarification, because we had a shortage of 50 in one transaction, and then what we had to state is a surplus of 50. But for the system to keep the shortage previously, I guess we don't have to delete the previous inventory document, because if we do, then it's like everything we did is gone. So here's the case for that. If I think if we could get inventory count document cannot be deleted. Okay, I think I see that in the chat. Okay, because there are, at least that is interpreted in some of the job aids and user guides, that you delete the previous document and then you start again. So if we, let's say we're never deleting it, then of course the initial difference will always remain, and all we're doing is adding a new difference. So they can even each other out if cleared. Okay. So if cleared already, it can't be deleted. So in the second scenario where it was cleared already, it's not deleted. We just perform a new one and add the 50, and that's why they evened out, okay, with each other. Okay, perfect. Very good. All right, thank you, Sega. Okay, so in this case, and I'm not sure that's where the question is going here for Ikram with the 200 difference for serialized materials. If what you want to do is to, it was a mistake to add the shortage of 200 and now you want to add them back, you already cleared your warehouse management, you would simply have to start new inventory document without deleting it because it's already been cleared. And just add now 200 but plus. So the 200 minus and the 200 plus would just even each other out. And then you could clear an inventory management from there. Okay, I think that is probably the answer to the question you're looking for. And if what you really wanted to know was in terms of write-off, then I think I didn't really get that from that question. Okay. Besides that, yeah, no, Sega, we weren't able to hear you. But at least through the chat, it's very helpful, so thank you. And Ikram, thank you too. So I believe that we have provided an answer there. So Ikram, in your case, I think your case is exactly the same as the one in scenario 2 that we were showing. So once you get this presentation, it's the scenario 2 presentation. And now that Sega is available, and we still, I know it's already 5 o'clock. Well, I didn't want to take that time. But Sega, we'll reach out to you and Rafael maybe in an email. I just had 2 clarifications to be made in our presentation before I share it with the students. Okay, I don't want to say something that's probably not completely 100% okay. All right, so thank you all. You're muted.
Okay. Okay, we have a final question. Maybe Rafa knows or Sega. It's very straightforward. If you know a C code to get the list of product ID, type 999, that can give different of a percentage and value. To get the list of product IDs that can give different of percentage and value. Dipendra, do you want to raise the question orally? If we unmute you.
Okay, I think, Dipendra, what you're asking here, I think in the presentation, there are 2 T codes, especially one that, and I think the screen is still being shared, and we'll take this one as the last question, because I know the time is already up. But I believe in the presentation we shared 2 T codes at least, the LX17, I'm just going to make sure that's the one I'm talking about. I believe is the one that's showing you the percentage that you're talking about here. Well, I'm sorry because I had already even closed the presentation in this case. I'm just opening it up again. So is there a T code to get the list of product IDs type 999? Okay, so what you want to know is those that are in your differences or storage type 999, because I know even some missions have a list of bins that they call 999, which could be a bit confusing if you call your bin 999. Okay, but the type 999 in this sense would be, if we're looking at, like I was sharing before, the presentation, we can have, here, wait, I'll get to it. The 999 itself in terms of disposal, if we're talking about the disposal, if that's what you're talking about, definitely you can see the list of bins and their status just by using any of the reports that you have to see the bin status. Okay, and you can see the type 999 there if you just pull a report on the bin status. Okay, and the percentage, I believe you're talking about the one where we were looking at before, not the LX22, which is the one you would do at the end of your physical inventory verification, but the one we were checking once you've already performed the physical count and you were looking at the differences. And let me just get to it quick. Sorry, I'm just going through the presentation here on another screen, just to give you the correct amount here. Okay, the LX17 is, I believe, the one you're talking about. Go to LX17. Okay, but you can reach out to us in an email so we can be a little more specific, and also if we need to clarify or you need to clarify what you're asking us in terms of the 999 type, okay, and the percentage. All right, so thank you, guys, and I believe it's time to close this WebEx session. So thank you all for participating, and we'll be reaching out to you in the next days.